All right, greetings again, guys. It's Jay Ocker, Keller Williams Real Estate by Design Group here in Dallas, Fort Worth. As always, joined by my partner.
Troy Jaster down in San Antonio, Real Estate by Design, Keller Williams City View.
Yep. So thank you all for continuing to tune into the series.
Yep.
And thank you all for the emails you've sent us. We're going to be sending more information out as we continue to wrap things up here. Our email address, knowledge@rebdgroup.com, is somewhere on here and you'll see it. Just shoot us a message, let us know your thoughts, and we're happy to share our info with you. So last segment, we wrapped up a two parts really of talking about scripts, dialogue, lead gen, things like that. And today we're going to talk more about something that's just as important that we think a lot of agents ignore. What is that, Troy?
Yeah. So I mentioned in one of the very first episodes that I really feel like there's only two things that we as agents can truly control. Number one is our mindset. Number two is our activities. Everything outside of that either falls into one of those buckets or is something that we can't control. Right. We can control our mindset. We can control our activities. So a lot of those first episodes with lead generation, prospecting, scripting, all those things fall under the activities bucket. But now if we talk about mindset, that is something so much bigger, because if I don't have the mindset, the activities are never going to actually happen.
Yeah, so it's a lot about focus and discipline. And
Yeah.
as you alluded to in one of the very first videos we recorded for the series, we talked about a couple of texts that we both really love to help our mindset out. Let's talk more about different sorts of media that you and I both like to absorb, just to kind of keep things squared away between our ears.
Yeah. So one of my favorite books of probably the last, let's say, 5 years is a book called Relentless by Tim Grover. If you especially are a sports fan, especially an NBA fan, you'll especially really dig into this book like I did. I read the first half of it on a flight from San Antonio to Tampa, Florida. I read the second half on the flight from Tampa, Florida to San Antonio, finished it when I landed, and it was fantastic. And it really comes down to just the idea of just never stopping. And you know, the roadblock comes up in front of you. Okay, what are you going to do about it? There's, all the stuff that happened earlier this year when Kobe Bryant passed away. There were so many stories that came out. Tim Grover was one of his personal trainers. He was one of Michael Jordan's personal trainers. And I remember there was a story about Kobe Bryant where some other NBA player, I can't think of who it was, came into the gym prior to a game. Kobe was already shooting before he got there. This other player worked out for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, whatever, left. Kobe was still working there for another hour after he left. And then they saw him afterwards and he's like, dude, why were you working out so long? Why were you working out so hard? And Kobe's response was basically something like, because I knew you weren't. I knew you were there. So just saying, like, hey, if you're gonna play at my level, this is what you have to do.
That's right.
What about a book from you, Jay?
That's a big truth bomb. So we talked about a couple of books earlier, Miracle Morning. I love the book. It kind of dictates the flow of my morning, but a couple other ones that I really love, Grit.
Yes.
Angela Duckworth. I know you've read it.
Yep.
And it talks about what really creates the successful people versus the ones who don't. And it really comes down to persistence. And when I read that book, and I've got it on audio as well, and I refer back to it quite often, it's just talking about the only impediment to your success is generally between your ears.
Yeah.
Right. It's you creating, if you're a KW, you're very familiar with the drunk monkey. You're finding reasons, or your subconscious is finding reasons for why you shouldn't do something or can't do something. And it's just nonsense.
One of the other books this is a really quick and simple read. I read this years ago and it always has rang in the back of my mind. It's called QBQ, stands for Question Behind the Question. I want to say the author's name is John C. Miller. Double check me on that, but just look QBQ. And the whole idea of it is when somebody asks you a question that's often not the actual question that they want to ask. My wife actually read it too, because it was such an impactful book for me. And so we have this common language very often where I'll ask a question and she'll just go, what's the question behind the question? It's just like, let's
get right to it.
It's cut straight to it, instead of,
I love it.
Hey, do we have anything going on Saturday? She's like, well, what's the question behind the question? And
what do you want to do Saturday, Troy?
Yeah, that's the real question is like, so the guys were going to go golfing and, but that's the real question.
I need to read that for sure.
Yeah.
I get benefit from that.
Short read, super good, super short, easy read.
Yeah.
Really good.
Another one that I love is Tribes. I don't think it's a crazy popular book. I haven't heard about it in a lot of circles, but
That's
it talks
a Seth
about
Godin book, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it is Seth Godin,
Right.
and it talks about it has a lot of case studies on companies that you're well aware of, like Fortune 500s, and how they began and how they essentially found their following and their tribe and created their brand. It's really good stuff. It's also a pretty quick read too. But Troy, you are a podcast junkie. I am not so much. The only podcasts that I listen to are the ones you send me links for.
Yeah.
And there's specific episodes because there's something that will apply to current day or something.
Yeah.
Talk about your favorite stop offs for the podcast.
Man, there's a whole bunch. And I like to keep a variety. I don't just eat, sleep, breathe, drink real estate aid all day long. But from the real estate world, if you're at all into investing, Bigger Pockets is the place to go. That's definitely a great one. If you are at all in a team or a leadership position, a brokerage leadership position, there's one called the Team Building Podcast. And it's actually not just real estate related. You could easily get a lot from all sorts of different perspectives. Entree Leadership from Dave Ramsey's group is a really good one. They basically coined that word, Entree Leadership, meaning leadership and entrepreneurial, putting them both together. That's a great one. Off of business topics, I'm a huge cycling fan. I was a big Tour de France fan. Lance Armstrong, say what you will about him and his past. He's got a couple great podcasts. One's called The Forward. He just interviews some really fascinating guests.
And that one's funny. I have heard that one.
Yeah.
That one's crazy.
Yeah. So he's in, there's some language there. So, just want to make sure that's known.
To say the least.
Yeah. So those are some of the favorites that I listen to, the ones that I really look forward to when I see a new one pop up. I see those in there. And then one other, actually just a real estate related one. In fact, before I got my license, as I started taking all my classes and just my coursework and everything, I actually started diving into real estate podcasts just so I could start to absorb the language.
Yeah.
And one of them that I started on way back was Super Agents Live, a guy named Toby Salgado that lives in San Diego. And he basically interviews top agents week after week. So some really great content there too. So there you go. Cool. All things podcast.
Yeah. So if you can tell, we're kind of intense. We are education junkies. Gary Keller said something a few years ago. It rang true with me. And that is, if you're the smartest person in the room, leave that room. In other words, surround yourself and act like people you want to be like. And those are generally, I hope, successful people. But to sum up kind of the education angle of this, we've talked about books and texts and podcasts and things like that. We haven't touched on classes yet. Yeah. So there are constantly classes offered. And whether you're KW or Keller Williams or not, there's tons of free training out there. Title companies. Right. Go ahead. Let's dive into that.
And we're not just talking, because I know so often the training side of things in real estate is just, we just think about the single track of getting my CE course credits.
Right.
And I mean, let's be honest, are those classes where you get the best training? Not always.
Yeah. Sometimes
they're great, but sometimes all that they're doing is just checking a box.
Right. Yeah. So you have what is called book knowledge versus functional knowledge.
Yeah.
Like if I took a real estate exam right now, I would probably fail. I'm just saying. I'm just being honest. I'm just being completely transparent.
Yeah. But then on the flip side of that is, if you would have tried to practice real estate immediately the day after you took your license exam and passed it,
right,
you probably wouldn't have been that good, or you probably weren't that good.
Yeah.
Because we all know that the actual function of the job is not covered on that test hardly at all.
Now, if you're Keller Williams, or if you've not, you may or may not have heard of Bold. Bold was a game changer for me.
Yep.
The first time I took it, it makes you uncomfortable. It holds you accountable, but you absolutely see results. And because we are in a reactive business, we talked about that earlier in the series, it's important that you be able to see results or track your success and failure with your endeavor. So talk more about Bold and what's coming up here.
Yeah. So the traditional Bold was an 8-week long course. You take it one day a week for 8 weeks, very intensive, like you mentioned, Jay. And I look at it like my car maintenance. If I don't get an oil change for the first 100,000 miles, eventually my engine is going to absolutely seize up and the whole car is going to die. But if I'm regularly getting maintenance, then it keeps it tuned up and keeps it in top condition. That's the way that I look at Bold. I committed to myself that I take Bold every single year. Once a year, I'm taking it. And it's because I'm a different person. But the very first time I ever took the course, I had 0 transactions to my name. I was 2 or 3 months into the business. So it's very, very different than where I am now. Being that I've had, a decent amount of success over the past few years. So it's a very different position. So Bold, because of everything that happened in the last few months with COVID, had to change. So there is now what's called Bold Pivot. It's an online version. They had it in May, April and May, I forget. Anyway, I took it then. It's fantastic. And it's starting up again in July. You can just search Bold Pivot, Pivot, for July. And I'm sure you'll find it. It's $99 and it is worth every single penny and much, much more.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a great refresher. And for anyone, like I mentioned, who may not be with Keller Williams and is hearing this, all of Keller Williams training is open to anyone. You don't even have to be licensed. So if you're seeing this and you're not licensed, you're in the process or even thinking about it, tackle those opportunities. They're right there for you. And you're not the only one in the room in the same boat. I promise you that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there were like 40,000 people that took it in May.
That's absurd. There will be at least that many more next time too.
Right. And we know for certain that that's all not just Keller Williams people. It's open to, it's the rising tide raises all ships. It's that idea of if everybody else is better.
For sure. Absolutely. Well, great. So again, our contact information, knowledge@rebdgroup.com. Hopefully it's right there. Again, thank you so much for tuning into this. Next week, we're going to kind of put a bow on everything. I keep saying next week, next segment, we're going to put a bow on the whole series, just kind of summarize what we've talked about, make sure we've got all your information so we can blast out the resources that we've been discussing over the past few weeks. Again, comments, questions, anything else you'd like to discuss offline, we're always here to help grow your business any way we can. We want to see you successful.
And if you email that knowledge@rebdgroup.com, we're going to not just provide the list of these resources that we've talked about, but also a more expanded list of our favorite books, my favorite podcasts, and then links to some of those events and things for signing up. So all of that will be provided. All you got to do is just shoot an email over to knowledge@rebdgroup.com.
Cool. Thanks, Troy. I will see you next time.